You know someone like this? They've been through more than most people could imagine. Divorce, loss, illness, financial collapse, maybe all of it at once. And when you ask them how they're doing, they say fine. Not dramatically, not with a brave face, just fine. Like the question barely registered. Like they ran the numbers in their head and decided the real answer wasn't worth the conversation it would start. Meanwhile, someone else in the room is having a full meltdown because their coffee order was wrong. And you look back at the quiet one and think how? How are you this calm? And here is the thing nobody says out loud. It is not strength. Not exactly. And it is definitely not that they don't feel it. The psychology behind why the most enduring people complain the least is far more complicated than toughness. And it starts earlier than you'd think. And it starts in childhood, almost always, before you had the vocabulary for what was happening to you. Picture this. You are 7 years old. Something happens at home, something big. Maybe your parents are fighting. Maybe someone's sick. Maybe there is no food in the fridge and nobody's talking about it. And you look around and realize something no child should have to figure out. Nobody's coming. Nobody's going to fix this. And if you fall apart right now, it is only going to make things worse. So you don't fall apart. You get quiet. You get steady. You become the calmest person in the room because the room needs you to be. And that quiet, that steadiness, it isn't natural. It is learned. And it is learned under conditions that no child should be the teacher for. Psychologists call this parentification, when a child takes on the emotional responsibilities of an adult because the adults aren't doing it. But it goes beyond parentification. What is actually happening is something called emotional compression. The child learns to take very large feelings and compress them into very small spaces. Not suppression. Suppression is pushing feelings down and pretending they're gone. Compression is different. It is quieter. It is making the feeling smaller, so it fits inside a life that doesn't have room for it at full size. The feeling is still there. It has just been folded so many times that it looks manageable from the outside. And here is where it becomes a pattern. Once you learn to compress at 7, you don't stop at 7. You compress at 12 when the other kids are complaining about curfews, and you are worried about whether the electricity will stay on. You compress at 22 when your friends are stressed about rent, and you've already survived actual poverty, so rent feels like nothing. You compress at 35 when your partner says they had a hard day, and you listen with full attention because their hard day deserves that, even though your version of hard includes things you'll never bring up. Not because you are competing, because you genuinely believe their struggle matters more than yours. That is the compression talking. And here is the part that nobody talks about. The compression doesn't just affect how you express pain. It recalibrates your entire scale. When you've experienced real loss, real danger, real instability, your nervous system resets what counts as a crisis. The threshold moves. A traffic jam isn't stressful when you've been in a car accident. A rude email isn't devastating when you've been abandoned. A delayed flight isn't a crisis when you've slept in a car. Their scale doesn't start where yours starts. The bottom 3 inches of their ruler were burned off a long time ago. Psychologists call this stress inoculation. Exposure to extreme stress actually builds tolerance for future stress. But here is the thing they leave out of the textbooks. Inoculation implies a controlled dose. What these people went through wasn't controlled. It was survival. In plain English, they're not ignoring the problem. The problem just genuinely registers as smaller because they've been forced to hold bigger ones. But there is another reason, a darker one, and it is the one that hits closest to home. Many of the people who complain the least learned early that their pain made other people uncomfortable, that when they did speak up, the response wasn't comfort, it was discomfort. People changed the subject. People minimized. People one-upped. Every single time you open the door a crack, someone shut it. Oh, you think that is bad? Let me tell you what happened to me. And just like that, your pain became a conversation starter for someone else's story. And eventually you learned the quietest lesson of all. My pain is inconvenient for other people, so you stopped offering it. Not because it went away, because you learned there was no safe place to put it. And here is the cruel paradox. Because they don't complain, people assume they're fine. Because they're fine, nobody checks in. Because nobody checks in, the compression continues, and the cycle just keeps going. Year after year, decade after decade, quiet building on quiet, they become the person everyone leans on, the steady one, the rock, the friend you call at midnight, the coworker who stays calm in a crisis, the parent who never raises their voice, and nobody ever asks what the rock needs. Because rocks don't need anything, right? That is the lie. That is the thing nobody corrects, and it is the thing that keeps the quiet ones quiet. The people who endured the most aren't fine. They're practiced. There is a massive difference. There is a difference between someone who doesn't feel pain and someone who has been carrying it so long. They forgot they're allowed to set it down, and what they carry is specific. It is not just the original pain. It is the weight of never being asked about it. It is birthdays where nobody remembers what that date actually means to you, where the candles feel heavier than they look. It is holidays spent performing fine for the comfort of others. It is the quiet arithmetic of deciding every single day which version of yourself the room can handle. They're not stoic. They're strategic. They learned that the world has a limited tolerance for other people's suffering, and they adjusted accordingly. And the adjustment became permanent. It is not a choice anymore. It is architecture. They built the walls so well that even they sometimes forget there is something behind them. So maybe it is time to look at the quiet ones differently, not with admiration for their strength, with curiosity about their silence. Because strength that never gets to rest isn't strength. It is endurance. And endurance without relief is just a slower way of carrying everything alone. The most dangerous thing we do to the people who endured the most is believe them when they say they're fine, because they've spent a lifetime making sure you would. They're so good at fine that nobody ever thinks to look underneath it. And all it would take sometimes is one person not accepting that answer. One person saying, I know you are fine, but how are you really? Not as a challenge, not as a demand, just as an open door with no expiration date. Not to fix them, not to save them, just to let them know that the door is open if they ever want to walk through it. So if you are someone who never complains, if you carry things so quietly that people forget you are carrying anything at all, if fine is the word you use most, even when it is the least true, I want you to hear something that maybe nobody's said to you directly. You don't have to perform your pain for it to be valid. And you don't have to carry it alone for it to be real. The people who endured the most deserve more than admiration. They deserve someone who stays long enough to hear the full answer. If this hit home, please subscribe. And if you want to support these deep dives, hit that join button. I would genuinely appreciate your support. Take care of the quiet ones. They won't ask you to, but they need you to anyway.